Hello, everyone. It's Cate Stillman with the Thrive with Cate podcast, and I'm here with Julie Ryan, who is going to unveil her buffet of psychicness with us. You can find her at askjulieryan.com. I was just thinking, Julie, so let's see, you're in Birmingham, Alabama. I'm in Wyoming. We're in like two of the most like different parts of the United States you could be in. And I was just thinking, like, when one is little, and people are like, what are you going to be when you grow up? People don't probably predict that they're going to be a psychic, but maybe you did because you're a psychic. So I'm so curious, like, when did you know that this was your life path? I mean, you've done so much. You've had companies, done a lot of, you've done a lot of things in your life.
Yeah, I'm a serial entrepreneur. To your point, I've founded 9 companies in 5 industries, and I'm an inventor of surgical devices sold throughout the world. So I did not know I had these abilities. I did not have dead people chasing me as a child. Or if I did, I didn't know about it, let alone what I would have done with that information. I learned how to be a psychic medium and medical intuitive. And now I teach people all over the world how to do it. And everybody has the ability. You don't need any special skills. We all come in with the hardware. It's just a matter of developing and enhancing them.
Yeah, I mean, in Ayurvedic medicine, even in yoga philosophy, which is a bit of my background, it's taught as part of your physiology, whereas like we have it's like a system of thinking, and that part of the world that anyone who's just trying to understand, just like you have a brain, you have a heart, it's like you have this intuitive sheath,
Right.
this big jnana, which is connected spirit to mind. And right. And it's like right there on the map, on the biological map. So I'm curious for you, talk a little bit about like your path of awakening and even desire to get training and being more of a psychic medium.
More than 30 years ago, a little more than 30 years ago, Cate, I had a friend give me a book called Anatomy of the Spirit by Carolyn Mays.
Mm-hmm.
And she called herself a medical intuitive. Excuse me. And I'd never heard that term before. And I wanted to know more because I'd been in the healthcare industry for a long time at that point on the supply side of the equation as an inventor and manufacturer of surgical devices. And before that, as a sales rep selling hospital supplies. So I wanted to know more, and we didn't have the internet yet. I'm dating myself. So I did the old-fashioned thing, and I went to a bookstore. I thought they're more likely to have woo-woo stuff in the
I
bookstore than
remember
they are in my
those.
library.
Yeah.
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 And so I found a book called Anatomy of the Spirit by Barbara Brennan, who was a former NASA physicist who parlayed very complex quantum physics principles into understandable English and how to parlay that energy into healing energy. And I wanted to know more. And so I called her school, which on the time was on Long Island. And I said, you guys got anybody in my area teaching this stuff? And she said, yeah, as a matter of fact, we have a graduate that just opened a school there. And I studied with her for several years. And now I teach what's taken me 30 years to master. I teach it in a weekend. And we've had hundreds of people from, I think, 15 countries so far go through my class. And everybody can do this stuff, Cate, in the first hour. Everybody can do it. And I think that's the thing that surprises people the most.
Hmm. Do you want to share a little bit about how you teach that's effective, or how to give people a hit?
Sure. It's really not what most people think. It's very different from normal studies. I'm allergic to homework. I was when I was in school. I still am. When I hear about kids that have to do a bunch of homework, I just think they need to make a federal law to outlaw homework. It's just not fair. You got to be in school all day, then you got to go home and do all that stuff. Ugh. So the way that I teach is it's 10% technique, 90% transfer of energy from me to my students. And it's a matter of instantly turning your abilities on and off. It's fine if you want to meditate for an hour and twirl 3 times and jump on your left foot and raise your right hand. If that helps you get in touch with spirit, that's fine, but it's not necessary. And so I teach how to turn your abilities on and off instantly, how to do the whole buffet of psychicness, because I find that in the woo-woo space, and woo means source in Taoism. I'm sure you probably knew that
Yeah,
already.
Wu Wei. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think woo-woo is just a fun word. And what I do is I think it's interesting how the woo-woo space is very divided. You got the psychics and the mediums and the pet psychics and the near-death experiences or people and the past life people and all that. Well, once you connect with spirit, you can do it all. And that's why I've coined it the buffet of psychicness. And I'm an entrepreneur, so of course I'm gonna have to do it differently than everybody else. But I found a way that's really fabulous in that it's cut to the chase. Here's the bottom line. Here's, you know, how you do it. 10% of it. Here's the transfer of energy. And then we have practice groups that go with all my trainings. I've got a couple that are online, self-paced. And then I've got my big one twice a year that's over the weekend that's taught live, one in person, one online. And they all have practice groups. And that's really the secret sauce.
Mm,
'Cause you can go to a workshop, you can read a book, you can watch a video, but until you're doing it and you get validation for what you're doing, you don't really get it.
mm.
Like driving a car, till you're behind the wheel a few times, you don't really understand what it's all about.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. I've also been a bit of a serial entrepreneur with more with coaching and clubs and courses, and it's all like where the rubber meets the road. It's like all of the like what are the habits we're doing in real time? Like
Yeah,
what are we doing? Because it's what we're doing that changes. That's what changes things. It's not just the cognitive thinking, learning
right.
treadmill on that. Yeah, do you want to teach? Do you want to teach the listeners something to get in touch with their psychic abilities?
Well, our heads are like big satellite dishes. They receive and they transmit frequencies. Every spirit has a frequency they keep throughout all of their lifetimes. So, in order to get in touch with any spirit, whether it's attached to a body or not, is irrelevant. Whether you knew the person or not is irrelevant. Who do you want to talk to? Your grandma, Napoleon, Moses, Elvis, doesn't matter. You think of them, that tunes your satellite dish head to their frequency, and it opens up a two-way communication, much like a radio channel. And then you say something and they're going to answer you. And how you know it's from the spirit with whom you're communicating is it's that first thing
Mhm.
comes into your head instantly, or sometimes before your comment or your question is even finished, because time doesn't exist in the spirit world. Time's a human creation. So they've already got what you're saying to them and they're responding. And it really trips people up when they get an answer before their thought is done being thought.
Mm,
And I'll say,
mhm.
"No, it's just because 'cause they've got your thought already, because they've got it instantly while you're still thinking it." And it's really fun. Once you practice that and you get validation, the more validation you get, the more you trust it. The more you trust it, then it's just second nature.
Right. And so for how many like for how many people is the trust part really the hard part? Like where they're getting the information, but one of the things that I found so much in my career, just first of all teaching and guiding people into Ayurvedic medicine and into the circadian rhythm habits and to intermittent fasting now into primal habits is like so much has been cultured out of us. There's so
Yeah,
much deep wisdom and strong intuition and even like these words like dharma or life purpose or self sense has been so just trained out. And as a mother of an 18-year-old, I just see, how culture just wants to like train her into a specific way of thinking and being and orienting to the world, which in many ways doesn't ask much of her intuition at all. Like very much in my experience, like suppresses that and then increases things like doubt and fear. She's a very confident person, but I can just see how like and remember back in my own path of deeply attuning to desire and asking the questions and just moving in a very intuitive path into a very uncommon career and lifestyle, and how many people around me were projecting their doubt and fear. as I was following my psychic intuition, right? So I'd love for you just to talk a little bit about this, about doubt, fear, trust, and the
Mhm.
process of becoming more psychic.
Well, I think the bottom line is back around 1900, Rockefeller changed the way our education system, especially here in the United States, and also affected it elsewhere in the West, primarily, that we were trained to be employees. We were trained to follow a boss, what a boss was telling us, and to negate our own intuition or our own ingenuity in our own ways of thinking and to do what was being requested of us as an employee. And certainly that was during the industrial age where people needed to follow instructions if they were working on a production line or something like that so that they didn't get injured or even worse, killed. There is that, but I find that that still very much permeates our education system. You memorize something, you spew it back on a test. All right. Well, a lot of the stuff that we're being forced to learn in the schools is just not relevant anymore to our lives. It wasn't when I was in school. I remember thinking, why do I have to even take this class? It's not gonna do anything for me in my life, and it hasn't. So
Mm,
I'd study it and cram for a test and then spew it back and then forget about it the minute I walked out of the exam.
yeah,
So I think that our educational system really needs an overhaul
yeah.
badly, at least here in the West, and I find that the old guard that really was raised that way and believed that way, they're dying off.
Mm.
And the
So, like,
younger
more like Woo's getting more mainstream, right?
Yeah, the younger people
Yes.
are they're not inundated with as much of it that you
Mm,
have to do it this way, you have to follow what the person who's in charge says, whether that be a political person or somebody who's maybe in a religious position. If it
yeah,
doesn't feel right and it doesn't make sense to you, don't do it. And that's
right,
a whole new way of thinking
yeah,
based on what my parents and grandparents and other ancestors and yours as well, how they were all raised.
yeah.
I find that spirituality is much more part of the zeitgeist now and
Mhm.
becomes more and more each year. And each generation that's born comes in more advanced. You see a toddler know how to use my iPhone way better than I do, and they're not even talking in sentences yet. So how's that work? Well, they're coming in more advanced because of the knowledge base that those of us that have preceded them are putting out there in the ethers and the collective consciousness, and these little squirts come in and they're ready to go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and spiral like an integral theory with Ken Wilburn's spiral dynamics where they really map consciousness and over time and generations. It's like naturally the next generation goes a few steps
Mhm.
beyond, right? And so that
Yeah,
we're constantly growing and incorporating. I find that, yeah, it's so cool hanging out with my teenage friends that way, and it's
I
like that's
know.
what really does in so many ways, like tune us into how is just even in terms of like how's the world evolving,
Mhm.
right? And where people start to age so much more rapidly is when they stop being interested in like what are the frequencies, what are the changes, and then we start to other, the younger generation saying like they're different, they're like, unrelatable, right? And that is part of I think a lot of that divisive type culture that you were mentioning that it's probably expiring right now,
Mhm.
like on
But
the
I
way.
think it's always been that way. When
I
I
think
was
so too, and I think
growing
it
up
might
in the
also.
'60s,
Yeah.
yeah, as a kid in the '60s, that was the hippie generation, and my parents were mortified with the music and how they dressed and all the drugs and what they did and all of that, and before them, then you had the Fonz and those guys from the 1950s that were very different from the Rat Pack in the 1940s. And so I think there's each generation, there are so many
Yeah.
differences and changes. And we've always heard, well, the children need to do what the parents tell them to do because the parents are so much more knowledgeable. Well, I beg to differ in some instances where the children really are more advanced and they know more than we do, and we need to listen to them, even the really little ones.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think that has everything to do with, like, what we're starting to clear generationally,
Yeah.
as and they're like, "Oh, energetically, what is like, oh, what is going on?" Especially those that are recovering from, unattachment parenting where it was, like, very, very divisive and very that structural parent knows best, and then as we're getting more healed and more not everybody, but as, like, in culture in general, like, a little more woo-woo, a little bit more attachment, a little bit more energetic, a little bit more psychic, a little bit more spiritual. There's so many more of our channels that are being respected and open, right?
Right.
So in terms of, like, your history with medical device and medical intuitiveness, like, talk a little bit about for people who've never heard of a medical intuitive, what really that is about.
For me, I'm like a human MRI. So I will connect in with somebody energetically. I could find you, Kate, if you were on a planet in a galaxy far, far away. It
Mhm.
doesn't matter where you
Yeah.
are. It doesn't matter if you're flying across an ocean at 40,000 feet in the air. I can connect with you energetically. And then I have a hologram of you in my mind's eye. And it's as if I'm looking at an X ray or a CT scan or an MRI. And so something will be identified. I can see broken bones, torn ligaments, viral infections, bacterial infections, can cancer, whatever. And yesterday I was working with a woman who's trying to get pregnant, and I had her girly parts on my radar. I was checking her pelvic area, her GYN organs, and her left fallopian tube was injured. I mean, it had a bunch of scar tissue in it. It was obviously something had happened to it. And I said, "Did you by any chance have an ectopic pregnancy?" And she said, "Yeah, I did. How do you know?" I said, "I can see where the damage was done in the fallopian tube." And so we did a healing. It's spirit working through me and with me to help facilitate healing. And we cleaned it out and used a little stem cell energy to repair it. And now it's clean sailing and slick as a whistle. And in the meantime, I saw her baby's spirit that's waiting to be conceived, that's attached to her energy field. Baby spirit's always attached to the mom's energy field before they're conceived. So I can always tell, how many kids somebody's likely to have because those little spirits attach sometimes years ahead of time. So I can see that, broken bones, whatever kind of ailment and then facilitate energetic healings. And again, it's spirit working through me and with me, Kate, to help facilitate healing because nobody ever heals anybody else ever. Medical providers, healers like you and like me, we're helping the person heal themselves. And I use the example of if you got a big cut on your leg and you went to the emergency room, the doctor would stitch it up, but that doctor wouldn't make your skin grow back. You make your own skin grow back. And that's how all of this works as well.
Yeah. When I was in Ayurvedic medicine college, one of my classmates, we had a really tiny class since we got to know each other well. And one of my classmates was psychic by training and trade. And she was picking up Ayurveda to help herself get grounded, really, because she was just so high ether in her, just in awareness and was just trying to help herself like get back into like routine, day to day health. And she did a reading one day during lunch, and we sat down, and and she would use cards as like a almost as a distraction or in a way, or like to get people's mind off in a way. So we were sitting there and pulled some cards, and she's like, "I think you need a pregnancy test." I was like, "What?" And so then like it was lunch break, so I went and got a pregnancy test, and she's like, "Yeah." And I was just floored. And she told me a lot about the energy of the baby spirit, and uh, it was such a, I think, pivotal moment really in my life of like, oh, like we have access to information. I'm like, here I am, like, I know my body pretty well. I do yoga. Like, you know what I mean? I meditate. Like, how did she know that? And I didn't know that. And that really had my needle going for, for a while. Just like,
Yeah.
what is going on? When you were talking about the being able to find you anywhere in the galaxy, it reminded me of I've been listening to a lot of mythology from around the planet, and in part to understand like the human psyche from various traditions, but also the stories that we've been telling as a species that are the oldest stories and
Mhm.
there's so many similarities, right? Like this story from this culture sounds so much like this story from that culture. And then these divine powers and a lot of these polytheistic systems, right? Where we have the myths, like the myths are polytheistic. They're not monotheistic. They're polytheistic. There's a lot of stories. There's a lot going on.
Mhm.
And a lot of what happens with this spontaneousness, this ability to cross time and space. And it just fascinates me at this point where, like, okay, we all have these abilities.
Mhm.
These stories they're in our DNA, they're in our minds, they're in our ancestral history. They're in our human ancestral history from like every continent, like in every culture. We have these stories. And I love this question of like, why do we have these stories of where we're
Mhm.
and the gods and goddesses are so different in both their abilities and their unique powers, and then also in their blind spots because they've all got these like horrendous, like they're not trying to be perfect. They're not in that monotheistic, everything is like white and pure and perfect. They're battling with each other and battling with their own inner demons, and they're trying to overcome their weaknesses, and they're making unbelievable things happen. And it's this whole, to me, like how are we now and like right now awakening to these powers within ourselves, especially those of us who are more in the woo way, woo woo world of just trying to like get out of like that whole white coat medical testing for everything. Like, and like obviously there's a time and place for all these things, yes. But it's like, yes, and like what are the capacities that we have in our more primal nature and also in our more developed nature when we're doing intentional trainings with each other. So yeah, I'd love for you to speak to any of that.
Well, the work that you do, the work that I do is part of the healing equation. Eastern medicine, Western medicine, homeopathic, Ayurvedic, energy. It's all part of the puzzle. And it's all helping that person, as we talked about a couple minutes ago, heal themselves. And I find, to your point about the mythology, they're all parables and they're all ways that at the time when they were written were intended to help us understand a bigger meaning through our own human frame of reference of what we explored and experienced at that time. The thing that I hear over and over again from Spirit Cate is there's no right, there's no wrong, there's no good, there's no bad in the spirit world. It's just an experience.
Mhm.
And so as those gods and goddesses are we're reading about him and we're thinking, my goodness, your life is a train wreck. And they didn't have trains invented yet. What it makes me think is everything's just an experience and we expand each time we experience something. When I'm doing past life work with somebody, which is so much fun because we can validate a lot of the information that we get from spirit with historic documentation online. And I always say, you can't make this stuff up. I mean,
Mhm.
there's no way, especially when you find validation online for it. And what I find is that there's a semblance of a script that's very basic that we'll go through in multiple lifetimes. And we'll look at it from a different perspective, different time, different place, different gender, different set of circumstances, same basic script. I had a client this morning who has a blood disease and she has excess iron in
Mhm.
her body a lot because she has to have so many blood transfusions. Well, we got that she was a uh, um, mineralogist, basically oh gosh, what's the word? That somebody that studies minerals, not a gemologist, but I'll think of it in a minute. And she was a professor in Lima, Peru, and we got the year and all this other stuff. And she was geologist. She was a geologist. I knew it was one of those G words. And we got a correlation about iron in that lifetime and what was going on with what she was studying. We got the professor's name, we got where the professor taught, we got the year that they taught there. So she can probably look them up and find them. But then we took that with relation of how it was affecting her in this lifetime, still studying minerals, studying iron, just in a different way. And I like to use the example a lot of Hamlet when talking about past lives, because when we think about how many times has Hamlet been performed since Shakespeare wrote it in 1602, who knows? But you think about in what language, where, in what year, what was happening in the world, who was the director, who were the actors, who was the set designer, same script, different perspective. And that's how I see our lifetimes. And back to the concept that time doesn't exist in the spirit world, a lifetime from our human perspective of 100 years may not even be a blip on the radar screen in spirit world. So it's fascinating. I don't think we're supposed to know the answers to all of these things. I think we're supposed to have the human experience. And what I do, Cate, is I merge spirituality with practicality to help us live a life of purpose and joy, because I think it's a combination. It's merging the two.
Yeah. Yeah. So in terms of communicating with the dead, do you wanna talk about that?
Yeah, just what I mentioned earlier. Our heads are satellite dishes. All we have to do is think of someone, and that tunes our satellite dish to their frequency, and they keep the same frequency throughout all of their lifetimes. So whether you knew them or not is, I mentioned, irrelevant. And anybody you want to talk to, you just think of them. That tunes your satellite dish head to their frequency, and then you say something to them, and you'll hear a thought in your head instantly.
Huh.
And that will be them answering you. So really, we have access to any information we want at any time. Again, it takes practice. The more you do it, the more validation you get. And then the more you learn to trust it, and it becomes second nature. Everybody does it. I wrote a series of children's books called Angel Messages for kids, for dogs, for cats, and for truth. And little children do this all the time. Little children until the age of about 6 or 7, when they're told by their adults or by a friend, "Oh, that's just your imagination. That's not really real." Charlie, who's your great-great-grandfather, who was an engineer on the railroad and likes to come play trains with you, the family knows who that is, but their little friends are going, "Oh, you're weird. There's nobody there. It's just an empty room." And then they learn to shut it down. But the stories are just amazing
Mm.
from these children. Little children talk with spirits all the time. You'll see a baby on a monitor just jabbering away, and the parents will say, "Who the heck are they talking to?" Well, they're talking to a spirit. Little children that wake up in the middle of the night and they're furious. Well, that's because they're mad that their spirits have left the room, who
Mm.
were there to play with them when mom and dad were asleep. I've seen scenarios that remind me of Toy Story, where it's almost as if the toys and the stuffed animals come alive when
Mm.
the spirits are in the room. I've seen that multiple times.
Right.
Also, how do children know information about past lives? And they can give very detailed information. This kid can't read yet.
Mhm.
And then lastly, how do you explain to a child when somebody dies that grandma's in heaven now? And little Johnny's going, "No, she's not. She's in that box asleep in the front of the room," because they're at the visitation hours at the funeral home. And so that's what the children's books are about.
Mm.
And they came about because I had so many mothers and grandmothers, Kate, ask me to write them. They go, "How do we explain this to our kids
Mm.
and the rest of the family members?" So
Mm.
So we did that. I've got one here that the illustrations are just darling, and they're all, what the angel is saying on each day, and the angels are they're all different. They're all different ethnicities and hair colors and
Mm.
things like that. So children love those
Love
little
that.
children's books.
In, in my clubs, like, one of the practices we've done is ancestral healing, so there's a practice from Ayurvedic medicine called Tarpanam, and it's a beautiful ritual where you call in whatever ancestors that have and they can be living or dead that you are just
Mm.
trying to heal something with, you're trying to process or heal or go into a pattern. Maybe it's a genetic pattern that's an inherited gene trait, or maybe it's, an emotional trauma that seems to be carrying through the generations that you're wanting to digest or uh, release or relieve, or maybe it's a sense of a healing with a past ancestor just to help them heal something that
Mm.
might be occurring in our awareness as coming up. And so in the practice of Tarpana, and it's very much like you're talking about where it's that radio frequency where you tune into the person, and it starts with it's kind of this beautiful, so it's this beautiful old practice, and you start by just visualizing something that they like, maybe like their favorite, like their favorite flower or their favorite food or their a favorite like piece of clothing or something, and you start with that offering where you're just in visualization, you're just offering and building that bridge of communication through this ritualistic intentionality, focused mental awareness, and with a bit of a purpose, right? Like there's a reason that we do this. There's a reason that we're tapping into our psychic abilities. And then there's once like this connection is felt, then there's this questioning, like you're saying, like this questioning and listening and this receiving, and it can be with words or just energies or visions or however the person
Mhm.
smells often will come up. However the person is using their 30 or various senses, right, that we now know that we have. And then there's, after this exchange, then there's this closure and this gratitude for the exchange. And what's remarkable to me about when people start to do it is like the first time's hard. Like the first time feels so weird or so
Mm.
uncomfortable or so like, I don't know if I'm doing it right. I don't know if I believe in any of that. I don't know. Like, and it's all that fear and doubt and self-judgment around the process. And what we found is with the habit of it, like just doing it seasonally, like even just starting with like bringing it into like a seasonal ritual around the equinoxes and solstices, just doing that with some intentionality and just trusting that which wants to be healed will be
Yeah.
on your frontal lobe. It'll be at the forefront of your attention. What we found, because again, I've been leading experimental communities for like 2.5 decades, is that like anyone can do it. It
Yeah.
worked for
Right.
everybody and
Right.
it's life changing.
Yeah.
Like processing some of that ancestral karma is just life changing. And I'll give one example, which is actually on an older podcast that I recorded on Yoga Healer 15 years ago with someone who specializes in Tarpana or ancestral healing with Ayurveda. And it was around my Jewish grandfather who like was starving, like literally starving growing up in Russia, had to leave home because there was no food, had three older brothers and a dad who got to the US before him, was able to like get there before the Holocaust, right?
Mm.
And before, like, the Germans and the Russians had their whole thing going on and all that, insane death toll. And I had a propensity to overeat. Like, I had this propensity to never feel like I'd had enough.
Mhm.
And when I didn't even know who. I didn't even know which ancestor
Yeah.
I was working with. I was just like, "I would love to get this digested, like, to honor this, to love this, to get this digested, and to get this somewhat cleared,
Mhm.
'cause it seems like a big distraction to me with what I'm trying to do right now in my life, and, kinda coming to the ritual with desire and this ask and this confusion and this like, I don't even know if we can get to the bottom of this. And then he shows right up.
Did you know him when he was alive?
Yep. And when he
Wow.
came to the United, he ate like he was a Russian 5x5. Like he was as round as he was tall by the time.
A 5x5.
He was like, I'm never giving up. Like he had no interest in looking.
Oh.
He loved being fat. Like
You know what's
loved it.
really interesting? My goddaughter married a Russian immigrant who's brilliant, went to Stanford on a full ride and then graduated from Yale Law School on a full ride too,
Wow.
and taught himself how to speak English at 16 when he got here from watching television. But when we go to a restaurant with him, he'll order 4 or 5 entrees because he wants to taste all of them and he wants to be sure everybody has enough food and all of that. And I'd never been around that before, but then my goddaughter said, yeah, they were hungry when they were in Russia and the supply was so limited
Yeah.
in what they could eat. And he's just like, life is a buffet, baby. And I'm gonna, he's wealthy. He's made a lot of money, self-made. And it is not unusual to be in a restaurant with him and he'll order 4 or 5 entrees and a bunch of
Well,
different
just in
appetizers.
that one Tarpanam session, I was able to clear the pattern, which I
Yeah.
mean, I had that pattern and I didn't clear that until I was in my 40s, and I had it since I was a baby.
Did you think that did you have an inkling that there was something like that in there, or did that just come up during the
I just had
exercise?
the desire to clear it, and not until I did the ritual did I even, and this is to me where it's like so much of this repairing, like, in, we have words for it in Sanskrit of like, we have this Vijnana Maya Kosha, this intuitive body where it's like considered a layer of the self, right? Like
Mhm.
as important as the physical body,
Right? Oh,
important
yeah.
as the mind, as
Absolutely.
as the energy body, as important as the spirit body. But in Western culture, right, we've lost that anatomy, right? It's like part of this anatomy that we've lost. And so again, like what I found in just like inviting people into a ritual of practice, like you mentioned, into doing it, it starts to rebuild that body. And so we can show up in doubt and fear and just like, I don't know, confusion. I don't know. I don't know if this is going to work. And I don't want to carry something, right? Because I feel like this, I mean, there's different reasons to connect with the dead and different reasons to connect with ancestors. But like one of them is if we do have something to heal
Yeah.
and it healed and it was just more or less the pattern was done, like no looking back. And I'm like, right? And I'm sure you experience this every day because this is your field of work, is that you help people turn on this ability that's part of our physiology.
Well, and furthermore, there's always what I perceive as a rupture in the energy field membrane, and that's the container that holds the spirit and the body, the energy. And when there's a tear or hole, there's an energy leak. Energy leaks always precede any kind of medical condition, and they're caused by an energy block, a la Eastern medicine. Acupressure, acupuncture, clear the block, get the chi to move, that whole concept. And energy blocks in turn are caused by an emotional event, either in this life or a past life. Not even taking into account ancestral stuff. This is about the person with whom I'm working.
Mm.
And so I'll envision going into that tear or hole and I'll be given information. If it's this lifetime, I'll be given a year and a little bit about what happened. They know 99.9% of the time as soon as I say the year. Yeah, my parents got divorced. Yeah, we moved to a new school. Yeah, my baby sister died. Whatever. They know that. I got divorced. I had a miscarriage. I lost a baby. My child died. Awful stuff. And it
Yeah.
can be something benign, like somebody called them a poopy face when they were little and it hurt their feelings. And we look at that as adults and we think, well, that was no big deal. And yet it was a really big deal to that 3-year-old little person when it happened.
Yeah.
So it formed an energy block. past lives, we get where it was, when it was, what happened. Like I was mentioning about this woman with the iron this morning. As soon as we illuminate it, it eradicates it, much to what you were describing about your ancestral healing. And the energy field membrane heals, body's working on full power now, helps the body regain and maintain health. I believe it's the most important part of a healing, Cate, because we can fix body parts all day long, but if you're leaking power, what's the point?
Yeah.
And the interesting thing too is I've done this tens of thousands of times, literally, because I talk to thousands of people a year and do scans on them. And I've never seen an energy field membrane rupture after it's been healed. I'm not saying it can't, but I'm saying there's a really good chance it won't, because I think I would have seen it by now. So if
Yeah.
I go back and I scan somebody that with whom I've worked in the past, their energy field membrane's intact. I've never seen one that's ruptured before. May I share an analogy that I use in my class for that? The energy field membrane is really thin, stretchy Saran Wrap to me. So if you imagine going to the pet store to buy a goldfish, they're going to put it in a plastic bag of water in order for you to get it home. Well, the fish represents our body. The water represents our energy, our spirit. The body's inside the spirit. I was taught the spirit's someplace inside the chest. That's not what I perceive. I'll come back to that in a moment. And then it's enclosed in this energy filled membrane, which in the goldfish example is the plastic bag. So if that plastic bag has a pinhole in it and water's draining out a drop at a time, for a long time, that fish will be just fine. However, when enough water drains out, that fish is going to be in trouble. And that's what happens to the human body over time. So we identify, where did that breach happen? What caused it? As soon as we illuminate it, it's eradicated. Energy field membrane heals. Body's working on full power. The spirit is depicted in a lot of ways. If you look at a holy person, a saint, or another holy person, oftentimes they're shown with a halo around their head or their whole body. And we think, ooh, that person's holy. Well, that's their aura. It's their energy field. It's their spirit. And we all are holy. We all have that. It's just that I believe that the artists of long ago could see that. They could see people's auras, and that's why they started painting them around perceived holy figures.
Yeah. Yeah. And even the word guru in Sanskrit means heavy. Like guru is something that's got weight or weightiness, and it's heavy with consciousness, right? It's like
Oh,
heavy with light. It's like condensed light. And
oh,
so that's what we are
interesting.
feeling, right? We're literally or experientially feeling that weight of, and again, in Ayurvedic language, we have such better words. You could say in the space, we would say that would be the akasha, right?
Yeah,
That we can feel the space around in between people. We can feel energies in the room, like you can walk in and know someone emotion. So we just feel that weightiness with that light. And then Shaktipat, right? Where there's a transference just from being in the field, which is why people tend to gravitate towards the guru. It's like,
right,
oh, I just feel better when I'm in that akasha, when I'm in that
right.
field. I feel more settled, grounded, awake, in tune.
Yeah.
Amazing. So we'll push people who are listening are like just super enthralled. It's awesome that Julie has this buffet of psychicness where you can listen to people calling in and asking Julie Ryan
Yeah.
questions. All
Call it and ask a question, or put a question in the chat on the YouTube live stream.
That sounds great. I'll definitely do that. I love that. And you can see on her site on askjulieryan.com. She takes appointments. So if anyone's interested in doing an appointment with Julie or going to one of these 2-day trainings to increase your own psychic abilities,
Or
those are
online self-paced too. They all have practice groups, and they're so much fun. That's the big thing. People go, "Well, always talk about how much fun it is, but I had no idea." I said, "Well, I tell you all the time." That's the one comment that comes out. Yes, they can do it, and it's so much fun.
Mhm.
doing it. It's just a blast.
Right, and, like, why wouldn't we wanna discover more of our abilities and just see what we can
Yeah.
do? Especially if we have that desire or inclination. I find so much when we, like, hold ourselves back from what we really wanna learn, that's where we're just going more and more to that old way of thinking, the non-woo way way of thinking.
Well, and they're so serious. And
Mm.
spirit's pure love and joy. We're supposed to be having a blast while we're doing this stuff. And the old saying, "Lighten up, Francis." That's we're supposed to have a lot of joy in our lives. We're supposed to, when we do this work, be enjoying it and being in the presence of others who are experiencing the joy as well, and then it raises everybody's vibrational level up.
Yeah. Amen. Amen to that. Well, such a delight to hang out with you, Julie.
My honor. Thank you so much. Remember, a free book for anybody that wants it.
Oh, yeah.
JulieRyanGift.com we'll send you a free digital and audiobook version. We've got it in Spanish too, if you want it. And it's what happens as we're surrounded by angels and the spirits of deceased loved ones and pets as we're transitioning. And everybody goes through it. There's university-based research that shows that 90% of people see the spirits of deceased loved ones and pets as they're nearing the end of their lives. And so I love it when science catches up with woo woo.